So I had a little bit of time to tinker today, and I wanted to go over something that is usually covered more on the tech side of things and less on the photography side. But I just ran into this problem, and I realized, I wonder if a lot of people even realize that this is happening. What I'm talking about specifically is the use of external drives and their corresponding cable types, and why not all cables are created equally. Where I'm going with this is, I would like to talk about how most of the time when we're in a rush, or when we're not thinking about it and we're using these external drives, these are portable drives. Okay, I might actually do a review on these two. One of them is newer than the other, but I use these drives back and forth between a lot of different computers. And the other day I was getting frustrated because, very specifically with this drive, I had it plugged into one machine, and that's actually an older machine, and I was getting my normal, 90 to 120 megabytes a second transfer speeds. And that's not megabits, it's megabytes. So don't focus too much on the numbers, except for to notice the difference, right? When I went to my secondary machine, plugged it in, I was getting 9 to 10. So I went from 90 to 120 down to 9 and 10. And nothing had changed. I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then I realized that I was using a cable that I had just grabbed out of my drawer, specifically this cable. I was using this cable that I had grabbed out of the drawer, and this is a standard USB style cable for the computer side of things, right? Let me see if I can get a better. For computer side of things, this is your standard USB, and then on this side I'm using the USB-C side of it, because that's what this drive takes. This drive takes USB-C on this side. I had grabbed this cable out of a drawer, and I was just using it, and it was crap. And the reason why I say that is because if you look close, you notice how the coloring on one of them is blue and the coloring on the other one is white. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time the blue represents USB 3.0 and 3.1. You get white or black, and that's USB 2. Now, they both have the same USB-C style connector on the other side, so you would think, they're the same. They should work the same. They look identical. Everything's minus a length. They're both the same, but they're not. This is what most people would call, or the industry would call, a charging cable. This is what you get with devices. In fact, I think I got this with one of my wireless mics for charging purposes. So if you run into this, or if you get a drive and it's not performing the way you thought it was, you get these Samsung specifically, these drives are high-end drives. They're supposed to have high-end throughput. And if you're not copying at high enough speeds, or you feel like it's just your drive is super sluggish and you can't figure out why, I would look at the cable first. And I would make sure that that cable is either has the blue, red, or yellow in here. Blue is more standard when you're talking about actual cable types. But the second thing you're looking for is this SS. And that's the second thing you're looking for as a marking. Usually when you see SS, that's a high-speed cable. Cable manufacturers are proud of the fact that their cables are fast, so they'll put this signature on there. Now, sometimes you'll get some knockoff cables, so just make sure you know that your cable's good. This one came with the drive, and they're not going to send, if you're spending a good amount of money on a drive specifically because it's fast and portable, they're not going to send you a crappy cable with it 9 times out of 10. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, and I'll probably throw, as I'm talking, I've got some screenshots of my testing from Crystal Diskmark, and these are benchmark testing. These aren't actual, copy files over, but they give you a good representation of how much you lose using a bad cable or a charging cable versus using a real cable. Now, here's the one that really threw me off. This is the cable I was using at the house specifically. On the back side, so I used this one, right, that I said I had used before. I had used this one. Well, I had one plugged into the back machine at home as well to charge my phone because it has fast charging on my motherboard. And I thought, well, it's USB-C to USB-C, so it should be a good data cable. In all honesty, I wasn't even thinking about that aspect of it. So this was plugged into the back of my machine. I have a phone that uses USB-C, and I plugged it in, right? And I tried to do a copy, and I was getting the same speed. So I'm like, crap, my motherboard. Like, there's something going on. I better go check some BIOS levels. I'm full on tech mode now. I'm trying to figure out why the heck this drive is so much slower on my newer machine than on my older machine. And it took me the next day when I walked in to my office with another machine that I have there to realize it's got to be the cable. It can't be that difficult. I mean, I was thinking about BIOS updates, I was thinking about drivers, I was thinking about all these things, and usually it's the most simple thing, and in this case it was. So I'm making this video specifically to point out that not all cables are created equally. Just because it's a USB-C cable and just because you can plug it into a computer does not mean that it is a fast cable. Okay, it just means that you can get power through here, and that's what usually you need with a cable like this. This is to power a dummy device. This is not a data cable. You can transfer data through it. I believe these are, at this point, I'm going to say, I believe the spec, they probably keep them down to USB 2.0, right, so they can actually stay within spec. So when you plug it in, it doesn't catch something on fire. I mean, even though it's a power charging cable, they still keep the standard. So I'd assume that this is a USB 2 cable. I wouldn't know specifically, but giving my tests, that's what I'm seeing. So it seems like for these dummy devices, they send you a USB 2 or the cheapest USB that they can kick out that won't catch your machine on fire or your charger on fire. And then they use that. So I know this is kind of going a little bit long, but just remember, if you're not seeing the performance that you think you should be seeing, and it's really easy to tell. I mean, you can take the drive you have and you can do a quick Google search and you can find these crystal disk marks online. There's a cloud-based system that'll tell you, 500 users tested this drive and this is how many megabytes a second it should be reading. And if yours is way off, then, it's either the cable or your machine or the device is bad. Usually it's the cable. Secondary, it's probably an older port on an older machine. You're plugging it into a USB 2 port on your machine and not a USB 3. That's usually the second culprit. And the third is the drive itself. Now, the fun part is I will make a video on this as well. This drive is actually encrypted. And when I did my encryption testing, when I did my benchmarking for this guy, you couldn't even tell it was encrypted on a Windows 10 machine. I mean, the performance overhead difference was 1 or 2 percentile, so it was within the margin of error. I mean, I couldn't even really prove that the encryption on it was hurting it. So that's something else that we want to talk about. But on older drives, usually platter-based drives, the big external drives, encryption could play a factor on your performance. But not on these newer ones. I haven't seen enough to make a difference. So I'm going to wrap this up just by saying, make sure you test your cables out, and or make sure you're using the cable that comes with the device, and just give a quick look. It's the color coding. I would argue is the fastest, most definitive way of knowing whether it's a faster cable or not. And then secondary to that is the markings on the cable. You could be saving hours of your life, and I'm not joking. I'm looking at the numbers in front of me, and like I said, I might try and do little cutouts. It is literally 10 times faster on the sequential reads and writes and the parts that mean something, especially when you're moving video and photos around. Think about that. If you have 10 minutes, which should be 10 minutes worth of copying and pasting, you've got 100 minutes. And I hope to goodness you're not editing on that drive. because that would just take forever. Your views would take forever. I mean, for video, it might not even be possible. So just remember that, especially when you're moving the device around. Usually, what'll happen is that you'll leave the device on the workstation, and you'll never touch it again. But if you get a new workstation or a laptop, or you start moving it around, those are the things you got to worry about. You got to worry about the cable, and you got to worry about the connector on the computer. But first and foremost, take a look at that cable, because I started looking around my house and I realized just how many of these type of charging cables I have around the house, and they're all USB 2, or I mean, for all I know, it's the first USB protocol. So as usual, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. If you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why. And as usual, have an amazing day.